Hey everyone, I'm Jason Lynch. I'm the head of marketing at NetSertive, and I'm excited to be joined by Azar Munir, our product manager, all things AI amazingness. So it's going to be a really good time diving into using AI to drive local revenue. And we organize this into thinking of it as a franchise AI maturity playbook. So we'll take a few different use cases and then say level one, level two, level three. I think this content will be really helpful in even thinking about no matter where you are on the AI maturity curve. These are all the muscles that everyone is developing these days, right? How to break work down into these component parts and expand from there as we apply AI to solve these problems. So, Ozzer, why don't you give a quick intro because only you can introduce yourself.
Appreciate that. Yeah, my name's Azar. As Jason said, I'm a product manager here at NetSertive, and I'm like an AI super geek. I use it for absolutely everything. Even my wife says, like, no, we need to talk through this. And I'm like, no, let's see what AI has to say. I'm obsessed with AI. And I'm looking forward to sharing this use case, which is probably better, a little better than relationships, how we can use it for business to, yeah, optimize all the things.
Awesome. Yeah, and definitely we will be sharing the deck and the recording and slides. So look forward to sharing that out after in case anyone has that question. So just a bit about NetSertive. If you're on this webinar, you're somewhat familiar with us. We really help brands take control at the local level, and we have done over $2 billion in media spend through our platform over the last 15 plus years. And we really offer end-to-end local digital marketing at scale. So if it's SEO, websites, paid, local listings, everything that you need to sell and market locally is what NetServe provides. And we really nerd out when it comes to the intersection of local markets, local campaigns, data optimization, and that's why AI has been such a fun thing for us to be diving into over the last few years. And we're starting to integrate AI more and more into our solutions. And so definitely we'll be sharing some of those learnings with you today. And like we said, we're thinking of this as an AI maturity playbook. So it's a clear path from quick wins to reliable systems. And if you think of AI, I think a lot of people are using basic prompts, but they're starting to hit their head on the ceiling, thinking, okay, it's not there are better ways to prompt than other ways, right? So you need to add context. And then when you add context, you realize if you give a mouse a cookie, it's, well, really, this needs to be self-sustaining in some sort of a system. So, Ozzer, how do you want to go through this today?
So yeah, I'm just excited to talk through sort of all the things, and we can I think go to the next slide. And we'll dig a little bit more into sort of what this means. So when we talk about AI, like Jason said, it's sort of at this phase now. We're sort of in year two, year three of like generative AI sort of being everywhere since ChatGPT being really the first one of the space sort of blew up. And that's when everyone started where we were more at this exploration phase, more like as a society where people were like, what is this thing? Is this thing useful? I remember, I have to be honest, when it first came out, I was on a team and someone was like, did you think of this? And I'm like, it's just nothing. It's just hype. Like I was one of those people for sure. And then, you start exploring it and you start like, maybe this is useful. And then it starts being incorporated a little bit into your daily life. And then suddenly we're sort of are where we are today, where it's proliferated. Like Jason said, some people, people are using it, little prompts, but it's really just everywhere. Like even I was talking to my niece, she's 13, and she was like, oh yes, I'm using ChatGPT to like help me find I forget what it was, something Taylor Swift related. And it's just like everywhere. And it's this sort of thing where just having simple prompts isn't going to be really enough anymore because that's almost, I like to think of it as like AI is like a base language now at some point, especially when we talk about the next generation, who are going to be the next generation of consumers soon. So we really need to get to that next stage as well. And when we talk about it more specifically from a business context, I think that's where it gets really interesting because, again, it's in a lot of organizations, it's already at that proliferation stage where everyone's using it a little bit. But where we need to go, as Jason pointed out, as we talk about this sort of three-phase approach that we have, we need to get from that basic proliferation, which can be seen as like stage one, to optimization, which is when we're really tuning in, we're getting better. And then at the last stage, there's transformation where the whole organization starts using it, incorporating it, and just the whole process is AI sort of built in. So there's a lot, yeah, there's a lot of room to grow, I think, for a lot of organizations, and I'm excited to, yeah, to help you guys get there.
All right, so we want to make this really practical because like anything, when you zoom in on a microcosm, oftentimes you can pull a lot of lessons from that. So we want to zoom in on three different use cases because no matter what you're thinking of, your pain point as you can probably pull something out of it. Um, and I think when we look at some of these, we already talked about some of the simple prompts, right? Where you have one or two people using AI. You probably have an Ozer in your organization. Maybe it's a franchisee, right? There's usually a couple franchisees who are like way early adopters and just so excited about, this new tech, and they're sending everyone the funny videos they made of themselves. Right. So you've got a couple of people using it, but then there's no shared prompt library. People are writing on their own. The brand voice is loose. There's no data in the prompt, right? Outputs are best guess. Maybe approvals happen by email or chat. Nothing's logged, so it's just really a disconnected system, even though it is, incredible and accelerated. So where do people need to go then, Ozzer, with adding context?
Yeah, so that's a great thing. So adding context is something that is actually pretty straightforward, which is good because I know a lot of times you hear like, oh, like yeah, it sounds great, it sounds amazing, but like we don't have an in-house tech team, we don't have all this, the capabilities to do this. But really, it can be as straightforward as just having a document. It can be in Google Docs, Confluence, whatever your system is, and just add all your prompt templates there, so that there is that shared context of like, okay, everyone's working from this. You can put in this data. You can have a little bit of light automation if your organization sort of supports that, but it really doesn't have to be more complex than these are the types of prompts we use here at this organization, and this is the type of work that we sort of expect. And that can be really great, not just as an output where you're like, okay, this is what I got out of it, but you can sort of put that back into the system as well and be like, hey, this is the type of, hey, ChatGPT, hey, Claude, hey, Perplexity, this is the structure I want for my output. And then just make sure you're brand consistent and you're, not getting red flags and not getting content that doesn't sort of make sense for your brand. So it's a really important step to get to that next level.
I like it.
Yeah. And then sort of where it gets really juicy, I think, is when we get to that integrated systems stage. And so this is where we're not necessarily doing that manual copy paste. We're not typing in information, but we're really incorporating AI as part of the workflow. So you have like real connections from, just as an example, your Google Drive folder to Google Gemini, and it's in real time reading that information. As you update information, it's getting that, it's updating, and it's just has the human in the loop as well. We'll go through a specific example of this as well, where it's not just this, it's AI, I don't trust it, what's it going to come up with? It's a real example, and it's validated by real information as well. And all that also will be put together in that added context. It's not necessarily that like once you get to level 3, you're never going to use level 1. I think that's a really important thing to talk about. It's like I still, we have a lot of integrated systems that are super awesome, super high tech, but sometimes I'm still like, hey, make me an image about this thing, right? Because you don't want to complicate things. And I think this happens a lot where people are like, it's AI for the sake of AI. We don't want to get there. We always want to think in terms of like a marketing context, a business context, what's going to help us get to that ultimate business objective. AI is just a tool the same way, a calculator is. Well, a little more advanced, but at the end of the day, it's just a tool. Yeah.
That's great. So if we take a dive into a few use cases here, right? If our desired outcome, let's say win the click. So we're all in the business of capturing attention online, of aligning our audiences with the needs that they have and how we're positioning our offering so that people will want to engage with our content. So if we take this use case of copy generation, right? Ozzer, how would you go about thinking of this on the three different levels here with level 1?
Yeah, that's really good. And I think this is a great one to start with because it's really like the core use case. And I talk to a lot of people about like, hey, what do you do with AI? And really the first thing that still comes to people's minds, and for good reasons, is this idea of like content generation, right? It's like I remember all those things that were blowing up with like, hey, AI, write me a story, write me a children's book, and people really gravitate to that. So it makes sense that that's a use case that we also incorporate sort of in our business context as well. And the way to start with this is, I always like to say, and everyone's always kind of doing this, but like play around a little bit in terms of like what works for you, right? Like it doesn't have to be this super strict thing. When you get started, you want to make sure you're getting a brand voice that's really authentic to you. And sometimes that means more than just like, hey, write like this brand. It's about really getting an idea of like what verbiage works. So in our example, once we have that sort of idea of where we want to go to and what sort of data we want to put in our prompt, this is how we would do it. So you're a franchise safe copywriter. So just putting those guardrails that you're not just SEO focused copywriter, you're not a product marketing post copywriter, you're a franchise safe copywriter. This is the brand, location, giving it very specific context is really important. And this is sort of ambivalent of what, or agnostic of whatever tool you use. It's making sure that the robot, the AI knows sort of who you're working with, setting the tone, and then asking again for very clear outputs. And this is really critical, especially as these AI systems evolve. One of the things I've noticed, so for example, with the launch of GPT-5 is that it starts thinking and knows like a lot. And sometimes it gives you a lot of context in a way that maybe you don't really want it, right? It'll spend a lot of time building out this huge deck. And you're like, I didn't really want a huge deck. I just wanted a 2-sentence answer, right? And that's one of the things that can really frustrate people, because often when it returns this big pile of information, it's also making a lot of assumptions that may not be correct. So it's really important to be very directed. I know I said play around, and that's important too, but you can play around to get an idea of what sort of, like, especially if you're new to these tools, what sort of outputs you're going to get. And once you have that understanding of the tool, be very specific and like, this is who I am, and this is the kind of information that I want. And it can be
Wowzer, you froze. Oh, okay, you're back. Sorry. Can you hear me, Wowzer?
Yep, I'm good. Can you hear
All
me?
right, yeah, you're good. You froze for a second
Uh,
for me. Go for it.
sorry. Yeah. So I just think it's huge having those defined inputs and defined.
All right, so we lost Ozzer on here, so I will keep going as he surely joins again. So we'll have the defined inputs and outputs, as Ozzer was saying, and I think this is just one of the keys to maturing the prompts that people are using at the local level. So I think if we look at, let me see here. Going to go to the next one here as Ozzer is getting back online. Um, and if we look at the next level here, level 2, so content generation, Ozzer's trying to join again. So I will, sorry for the rough patch here. We're talking about AI, but hey, you know what? We still got to do webinars. We still got to Zoom.
All right, perfect. Sorry about that. Zoom decided to update at the worst possible moment.
Oh my
So
God. Go ahead, Ozzer.
yep. So yeah, Zoom decided to update at the worst possible moment. So talking now about content generation. So at this level 2, what we really want to do is put in that performance data and help it shape what's the output in. So this can be something as simple of like, this is my table of information, or you can go into Google Ads or whatever tools you use, export a data set, put it in, and get some output from there. And this is really huge because now it's not just giving you general outputs, general information. It's being very specific to what makes sense for your business. So we're still tying this into level 1, where we're saying, this is my business, this is my context. But really now we're pushing into that next level. This is specifically what's happening to me, and this is the kind of outputs that I want. This can be a huge leap. Like the leap from each of these levels is really massive when we're talking about efficiency gains.
Nice.
And now we get to level 3, my favorite level. And so here we're talking about, as I mentioned before, what's called RAG. And so RAG doesn't sound super sexy or super interesting, but trust me, it really, really is. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And so what this means is that it's not just doing it, making content based on what's in the prompt. It's actually retrieving information from a data set that you've tied it to. So as I mentioned, you could tie it to your Google Drive, to your Dropbox, to your iCloud, whatever it might be, and then tell it, hey, based on this information that I already have, generate this content, right? So here, especially when we're talking about things like generating copy. So we can give it a list of all our potential, like former blog articles, for example, or former, copy that's really worked in terms of our ads. So maybe we go in, we pick our top 20 best performing ads, we put it in a folder, and we have the system read from those, and based on that, create an output. And this can be super, super huge, especially when you have a feedback loop. So that's the HIL, human in the loop feedback. So what this means is essentially it'll output something, and then instead of just trusting it or saying, like, okay, try again, you're actually going to say, yes, this is good. No, this is not good. And then that gets added also to the RAG in the sense of like a document that gets created every time you say yes or no, that gets added to your folder. And as you keep using the system, it keeps on growing, which is just massive, right? It's kind of what we all envisioned when we talk about AI. It's not just this like thing where you have to ask it a question and it gives you an answer. It's actually learning and growing as time goes on. So this is really the next stage. And I will say, to get to this phase, you do need generally to have some sort of technical staff on hand. We're not quite at the phase yet where reg can be done by a no code or standard marketer. But if you have the team on hand, it can be just massive. And luckily, it is one of those things you set it up once. So like, hey, read from this folder and update. You don't need to necessarily keep on updating sort of the technical brand behind it, but it can make a massive difference to the quality of your copy for sure.
Nice. So as we go through this, definitely if anyone has any questions, feel free to enter them into the Q&A and we'll get to those as we go. That's cool. So we've got a 3 different levels of copy generation. You can definitely see how, if there's a whole organization where you're sharing those learnings and optimizing based on what's working across different locations, for example, it could really be powerful. Um, so I think do you want to touch on this, Ozzer?
Yes, for sure. So this is a tool we built in-house. It's starting to, and that's sort of, we love to prototype. We love to play around with lots of different use cases of AI. So we have like a whole prototype zone actually, which maybe we can talk about in a different webinar, all the different things that we do. When we talk about content specifically, so this is a tool that we built for generating our own content as well. So you have the content type, tone, audience, variations, et cetera, lots of different things there. And as if you build a tool like this for your own organization, you can put in what makes sense for you. Maybe you're working across different verticals. Maybe you want to have different cities have different types of language you want to use. You can put in these inputs. Based on that, it'll create an output calling a Gemini in this case, but it could be ChatGPT, whatever it might be. That is an API connection, so that's done technically. And then once that content is updated, you see on the left there, it has this little output which is how is this good, bad, any comments? And then when you enter in those comments, it gets fed back into the system. The system sort of learns. So for example, you might say, oh, this copy was too, let me think of felt too professional, felt too sort of strict. My brand voice is a little bit more light, I want to have fun with it. So you can put that comment in, and the next time you have copy generation, it'll be a little bit better. And sort of as time goes on, it gets better and better and better, and just moves you to that next stage.
Awesome. Let's look at another use case here of smarter spending, right? I know everyone always wants to ensure that their budgets are going to the best possible place. And it's, a great opportunity to use AI to make a budget decision. So we can optimize budgets with it. So let's dive into 3 levels of that.
Yeah, so this is, before we start here, this can be a touchy thing because when you talk about AI to like generate copy or make like a cat, like funny cat picture, it's like, okay, that's cool. But when we talk about budgets, it's like, okay, this is my money, right? This is a big decision. So there's sometimes a lot of hesitation in terms of like how much can I trust a machine sort of to do this, right? I want to know where my dollars are going. And that's why it's important to know that it's not this like 0 to 100 where like I have full control to I have zero control. We can go through these phases and sort of, I would say, even though we're always encouraged technical integration, AI maturity, I would say as a business, it's also a matter of your level of comfort in terms of how many of these financial type decisions you're moving over to AI. But at the end of the day, AI is like, Excel is also a tool. Google Sheets is also a tool that you're sort of using to view data in a different way. So I just want to precursor with that because I know it comes up a lot in terms of like, what am I don't want to put all my money into AI. What if it, crashes out one day and spends all my money on, I don't know, some random subreddit and nobody wants to do that. So with that being said, starting on the principal one. So when you're just going into your budget shifts, so this is budget from a marketing perspective, you're putting budget in Facebook and Google and LinkedIn, wherever it may be. You can just suggest budget shifts for, my brand in this location, sorry, in this region across these locations, and this is a CPA I'm looking to hit. Setting some rules, and again, be very specific in the output. So this is something that will be sort of good to get us started. It'll also give you a good idea of like where that content is sort of coming from. Maybe it'll tell you like, hey, the CPA for this location, San Francisco, is going to be way higher than Arkansas, something like that. And that can be important information. It's not really always a ton to move you to that next stage, but it's still good information to get started. And one of the things I would recommend really overall, but specifically for this use case, is check your sources. So like ask it like, how did you, where did you get this information? And that's something you can put in the prompt as well, where like, okay, give me your sources for this data. So again, you make sure that you're making budgetary information that is correct. But as we go to the next phase, you can see this sort of evolving to a better and better tool. So level 2 would be we're actually putting in historical information, and this just makes it so much better. Similar to the copy generation use case, we're getting, we get our weekly roll up for the last 2 months. We upload it into the system and we say, hey, this is how I've been performing in this market. It can be very specific, right? Like this is a roll up for, let's say, hypothetically, these 10 locations. They're in different states. This is what's happening seasonality wise. This is what my performance looks like. These are my keywords. And then it has all that real data. And one of the really good things about this is that we often hear is like, oh, AI is great, but like my data is not clean. Our data is, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who are like, our data is a mess. But one of the really good things about this use case is that although it's your data, the data structure is not always yours, because generally you're just uploading it downloading it from Google Ads or Meta or whatever your tool is. And so it's already really nicely structured data. So it's something that's AI just like can really, really understand because it's really what it was built for, right? It's like very, very structured data. So I'll read that data. And then based on that, again, we have a defined output where like, okay, we don't want to make massive changes, only raise the changes in this case, give it a good confidence interval, because at the end of the day, AI is just doing predictive analytics, and that predictive analytics, can be good, can be bad. As with all these things, we're sort of learning over time. So we're, using this, we're getting the outputs, and I will caution again, we're not using it necessarily using exactly what it says and being like, why didn't this happen? We're still having that human in the loop, be like, does this make sense? What context is the AI missing? Maybe it's missing the context that, this one week was Christmas and that's why there was a big change. And so you can always go back and sort of update your data as well to have those parameters like, hey, this was an outlier. So it's really important that you have that structured data going in, and then based on that, you can get really, really important information and just keep testing and iterating, which I think is like the most fun part of marketing.
Yeah, I think it's again speaks to the importance of what everyone is realizing now, which is that you need to be a good data steward in order to be effective in feeding AI your data, right? So, are you annotating changes? Are you keeping a change log? Are you like, thinking about all these different things? If you make a massive update, if you know there was, an attack, cyber attack, or your website got hacked or something like that, that can massively swing your analytics and your data. So if you're not keeping historical record of that, you're going to forget about it, right? And your other people on your team are certainly not going to know, or new people are certainly not going to know. So it's really important to just, like you said, continue to note the context on all of these things. But I love the confined elements of that, right? Where it's like it's clean data from the platform, but budget shift recommender. What are you playing around with here?
Yeah, this is like one of my favorite tools, and I even give it a name because I thought it was such a nice little buddy. I was thinking of it like, you have a little like Pokemon following you, and I'm just thinking of like, yeah, there's just so much you can do. Who knows? Maybe in 5 years, that's what's gonna happen. I used to say like maybe in 20 years we'll have this, but now I feel like things are moving so fast that you could literally see like this is my marketing buddy, this is my strategy buddy, this is my content buddy. So we'll see if we get to there, but staying in the here and now. So this is a tool that's really just an extension of what we talked about in the last few levels, right? And obviously, this is what NetSertive is working on. It doesn't have to be this exact tool, but the idea is really talking about all those things we talked about in the last levels. We're uploading content, but instead going to the next phase, again, using that RAG system, using that human in the loop system, where we look at an entire data set depending on if it's a data warehouse, if it's something like Snowflake, that's even better. But even if it is directly connecting to Google Ads, Facebook, et cetera, you can look at all that data, have the AI identify outliers, be like, hey, this location's doing awesome. They are a rock star, right? Like they are just working it. And this other location, they're not doing so well. They need some help. And so those outliers can be identified by AI. And based on that, it can read, okay, why is that the case, right? And so taking it at the next level, and this is one of the really important things about AI, like AI chaining prompts was big, I think maybe around a year ago. And now we're sort of getting also chaining at the technical level. So the first, what are the campaigns that are the outliers? What are the keywords that are the outliers? And just learning and learning so much more information. And then once you have that information, you can analyze the spend distribution. And you can say, hey, this one keyword, this one campaign worked really, really well in Dallas, let's say. We think it'll also work really well in Austin because it's a similar demographic. And AI can give you that type of output. And once you have that, you can really shift budget on the fly. Again, it's very important keeping the human in the loop to say, yes, this is good. No, this is not good. But there's just so much to do. I mean, you can tell I'm really excited about this because I think it's the future of a lot of marketing where, you don't have to be looking at spreadsheets. We've had people where I've talked to people in the industry and they're like, oh, I'm a strategist finding outliers, downloading data, pivot tables, going from Excel to here to here. We don't want people to do that. You want things that they do best, which is actually thinking about it, understanding the bucket. Um, and I really think AI is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, this is another big one that always comes up in franchise and multi-location businesses, especially in franchising, where you maybe have more inputs and control in certain respects at the local level. So, brand consistency as a use case, how can you protect your brand? And I know this is something where we've been doing a lot of work in automation, but I think the principles are definitely interesting and helpful, even just in communicating right? Which is just where we are with this level one. So prompt for brand consistency messaging. Mhm.
Yes, off pretty straightforward, like with just like, this is our consistent pillars and just go from there. Like, and that's to save a lot of time internally because I know, especially if there's 100 plus franchisees, you're getting all this content, yes, no, yes, no. It can be huge just to have like a do not say list and just have a clear checklist. And this is one of those things where I think can work at both ends. It can be a good input and a good output. So it can help you come up with that checklist, and it can also help you validate your outputs against that checklist. So this is a really, I think, simple but really powerful use case of AI, especially for this franchise and multiplication space.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you're doing instructions, like if you're wanting to activate social with local instructions and giving people, guidance on content creation, where you're trying to empower people to get the authentic stories from the locations, but you want to make sure that you're brand compliant still. I mean, there's a lot of different ways of doing that. And this is such a basic way that even if you just give them the prompt and say, run your post through this before you post, you're light years ahead of where you were just a few years ago with maintaining brand consistency. Another one is uploading and checking against brand guidelines with this manual UI. What do you think about this one, Ozzer?
Yeah, I think this is super interesting as well. And you'll see a lot of these. And one of the reasons we wanted to do these three as examples to show you that a lot of the use cases really do go through that same trend where like level one, you're typing stuff in. Level two, you're uploading context. Level three, you're letting AI upload the context and read the information, right? So this is going to be at that level two where you're uploading your brand context. And then based on that, having the tool almost rate, like, is this brand compliant? Is it not? And giving you a very clear outline of like, this needs to change, this needs to change, this needs to change. You send that output to whoever made the copy or make the updates yourself. And it just, again, takes the human away from some of that boring work where you don't need to email people, hey, can you send me this? Hey, this is the output. They can just go ahead, upload that information, and get a really, really clear, clear next steps as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, and this is level three. Again, my favorite level. So I think one of the really important things when we talk about brand consistency is how do we do it while still giving franchisees, giving everyone still a level of ownership over their content, because we don't want to be so strict in the sense of like you can only say these, like Big Brother, you can only say these things, right? Often we want to let each franchisee, we want to let each person express their individuality while still remaining brand consistent. And it's hard to do that at scale. And I find that a lot of times what happens is that it goes either one direction where you are super tight or another direction where like people are doing all sorts of things that don't make sense. And one of the ways to really get ahead of that, this is where it's sort of getting to, is taking some of that more onerous work to the machine, to AI, so that you can focus more on those edge cases, use cases to see what makes sense. And so one of the things we've done at NetSertive is create this, again, as a prototype brand consistency checker. So this is where you could upload your main URL. So this is something where you may have a style guide. You may have one example of a location that's really, really tight to the guidelines. This can be something you can create as well. And then on the next slide, you can next part, you either upload a CSV URL or if like these are all my location pages, or you just put in the URLs there and it'll automatically check for you, flag violations, see like, hey, this text is wrong, is updated. This isn't your brand code. This is also tied in with our RAG system, as I mentioned. So we've uploaded like, these are the contents that we want. This is our brand guideline. These are the do not say words. And all this really comes together. And the real benefit of this is that it's dynamic. So as the base URL changes, so for example, you may have a new promotion that's using a color of pink that's not generally used in your brand guideline. You don't want that to be flagged across every page if that's something that you're doing and you've decided as corporate to do, right? And so with this type of checker, we can really do that on the fly and give a really clear compliance checklist. This actually on that admin section also runs on a schedule. So every week it'll check all these pages and it'll flag the violations. They'll send an email to the relevant parties, recommend updates, and just do it all in one piece. So you don't have to think about it as much, which I think a lot of what AI is about removing the thought and work on the boring things so that you can focus on the more interesting things. And the next level of this is something I'm sort of percolating, is also doing this for storefronts. So right now, sometimes you have to send out a field agent, you're taking a look, does this make sense? Is this like, are their signs correct, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things you can do with AI there is just take an image, it can be a 3D image or regular video, of an ideal storefront, and then check that dynamically against each individual franchisee storefront to be like, hey, we saw that this is wrong. Hey, you're still running an ad for an old promo. And that cuts out people actually having to drive out there, which can be massive, massive savings. And again, that time can be better used for more exciting and hopefully more strategic work.
Mm, that's cool. Yeah, you can definitely imagine how, anything where you're doing copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, or doing right anything that's very repetitive will very
Mhm.
soon be replaced by AI in one way or another. Yeah, I love the just that kind of an activation of thinking of like how can you actually have the locations be highly localized while at the same time compliant. I think.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, I mean, that's what we're all about, right? And that sort of is just giving both franchise, corporate and franchisees a level of control and comfort that you can do just to get to the next level. And one of the things I always like to think about with AI is that when you start, one of the things we hear a lot is like, okay, how do I get started, right? Like, how do I start adopting AI? And I think the important thing is that it does need to be a bit of a culture change. It's not the same thing as like, hey, you know, hey, friend, like sending out an email, hey, you guys start using ChatGPT now. It's actually about the way that you think about things. So it's not, I think you need to people need to get ahead from this idea of like AI as content generation to like AI as like an application of systems thinking, an application of automation. Where like if you're doing the same thing 3 times, is there a way like that you don't have to do it the fourth time? You can just create a system for it. And like as a software engineer, that's something that you're taught very early on, like this is the way you should look at a system. And I think one of the things that, and some people might like to hear, is that more people have to start thinking almost like AI engineers in their own roles. Obviously, that doesn't mean writing code. It could just mean, like, as you said, a better way to copy and paste. But that's a great way to just sort of reframe the thinking towards what AI is that can make a massive difference down the line.
Mhm. So I think we can transition to Q&A. I don't know if anyone has any questions, feel free to enter them in. I was curious, Ozzer, if you think about the level 3, right, where
Mhm.
you're starting to get into systems, have you seen any, because I know you talk to a lot of franchise networks and work with a lot of franchises, have you seen anyone starting to use like vibe coding tools or platforms to kind of build their own in-house tools for discrete work, process?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I've definitely heard some rumblings of it. I haven't seen, to be honest, like a fully built out version, but I know it's something that especially some of the more mature franchise systems who are, at that top level from a technical perspective are thinking about. But
Mhm.
I have to say, I haven't seen a great use case of it sort of in production just yet.
I feel like in a year it'll be probably more the norm. People trying to dip their toes in the water a bit. Uh,
Right.
so what do you think as far as getting started? Is there a large language model or platform you think works better than others for some of this type of analysis, right? When you're looking at multi-location analysis, consistency. I know you've used all of them.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point because there are certain things that each model is better at. I hesitate to give like a specific answer, to be honest with you, because they change so frequently. Like with GPT-5 coming out, a lot of people were, again, as you and I talked about, a bit disappointed, moved over to Claude Code or Claude in general. So I wouldn't say like use this one thing because honestly, it might be out of date by the time someone replays this a week from now. I think they're all good. It's just a matter of testing what makes sense for you. Sometimes it can honestly just be as simple as like, I like the UI of this thing. I like the black versus the white versus the
Yeah,
blue. So whatever you'll actually work with, I think is good enough.
yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
Um,
What about you? What's your tool of
I
choice
found
right
that
now?
Claude works well for data analysis. I think
Yeah.
I think the way that maybe the canvas is laid out, it makes it really clear what you're doing. And like you were talking about asking, where's this data from, or how did you get to this? I feel like I know ChatGPT does this as well, but as far as showing its work and being able to follow the story along, find that Claude is a good companion there for big data sets. But it'll still hallucinate. I mean, you really have to be careful still with hallucinations and it not inferring an answer, especially if you're doing analysis, if you're doing like CRM field work or planning your systems or something. It'll just make stuff up sometimes that is still, even if you tell it not to, um, then I find that's something you really have to be careful with for some of these things. And I think it speaks to having controls in place. So what would you say, Ozzer, to that question as far as governance or controls? What kind of best practices would you recommend there? Just either at like for any of these use cases or just more broadly?
Yeah, that's a great point. The hallucinations is still a big um, it's becoming a smaller issue, but it can still be an issue. And that's why I like to always, and I've doubled down in this presentation as well, talk about that human in the loop. So you're actually, someone is going through and being like, yes, this makes sense. No, this doesn't make sense. It adds an extra level of effort for sure. But I think it just, especially if you're at that level where you have um, the system reading from your feedback, it can just make a massive difference. So I think that's a really, really huge thing. And then I would also say if someone's at a more advanced level, like phase 2, phase 3, one of the things you can always do is create tests. So what I do a lot is if I'm creating any sort of system or any sort of like analysis, I will be like, okay, write it. Sometimes I'll do it in a different window, not even in the same chat where I'm like, this is what the tool says it should do. Write me a test and see and validate the outputs. So I'll write it a test in this one window. I'll put that test back and be like, okay, this is your test data, or this is the test, run it through, and then I'll take that output, put it back in the other model, and then have it rank it. And then you can sort of go back and forth with this until you have something that you're happy with. And again, it is a bit of that sort of engineer thinking, because that's what you're really doing when you're coding, is you're doing a lot of unit tests. I'll stop the details of the types of tests, but that can be a massive difference. So you're not just like, I hope this is correct. You're sort of getting ahead of the problem by validating that data.
Yeah, no, that's so smart. Yeah, I love that. It's definitely, and then that's even the kind of thing you can share broadly with your franchise network, right? Is as others are jumping in, teach them how to test, teach them how to go back and check their work on things. Well, thanks so much, Ozzer, for your insights and excitement here today. Definitely looking forward to being in touch with anyone who would like to connect afterwards. Reach out with any questions, and we're definitely will be sending the replay out as well.